This episode is brought to you by Loom, now part of Atlassian. Loom lets you record your screen, your camera, and your voice to share messages easily.
I'm Yasmin Gagne.
I'm Josh Christensen.
And this is Most Innovative Companies. On today's episode, Fast Company Executive Editor Amy Farley on the launch of our Most Innovative Companies list.
The process begins back in September. We've got a team of more than 4 editors and reporters who are involved in vetting these companies. We track their business success. All that to say, this issue was in no way thrown together in response to the election.
Senior writer Ainsley Harris on trading platform Robinhood.
I only will have enough if I get lucky. And that mindset leads you to this willingness to gamble, essentially.
And as always, keeping tabs.
Everybody knows who Connor McDavid is, right?
Not me. But first, here's the download. News you need to know this week in the world of business and innovation.
All right, everyone, it's time for the Elon Musk Corner.
AKA half the newscast.
Oh my God. I'm going to try to blow through these real quick. This guy does not sleep. He just keeps doing stuff. It needs to stop.
Ketamine's a hell of a drug.
Ketamine's a hell of a drug. I thought that was supposed to be a downer. I guess not.
Could be cocaine.
You got to balance it out with cocaine. Allegedly. We cannot be sued for defamation.
And this is coming from somebody who's never done any drugs. So honestly, I have no clue. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
You're like, man, that Excedrin really gets me going. Caffeine, hell of a drug. So let's start with Starlink, which was installed at the White House campus. Not really sure why the White House needed this, but the White House officials assured us that this was all on the up and up.
Assured us personally.
Assured us personally. No, assured the world personally in statements that weren't given to Fast Company directly. Weird story. Don't know why the White House needs Starlink. Let's move over to Tesla. It was reported this week that board members and executives have sold off roughly $100 million of Tesla stock in recent weeks. This coincided with Tesla's dip. I think it was over 50% down at last check. A similar sell-off did happen previously in November and December, and that's when Tesla's stock had reached an all-time high.
Maybe it's time to buy the dip.
Buy the dip to the moon. Let's stick with Tesla here. I just want to play you some tape from an event at the White House earlier this week.
Thank you all very much. I love Tesla.
This, honestly, you gotta find moments to laugh during this.
I love Tesla.
Okay, so if you didn't see, there was this event at the White House where President Trump was basically a used car salesman for Tesla. For a few minutes, got into a Tesla, was there with Elon Musk, talking about how he was going to buy one, doing a solid for his co-president there. And I'm just going to play one more bit of tape because it's very funny. This is Trump again getting into a Tesla, which also before this he said Joe Biden could never, and then did this.
This is a different panel than I've had. Everything's computer.
Everything's computer.
Everything is computer.
It's the new covfefe.
Oh.
Woof.
The most lib thing you've ever said.
Oh my God. No, the covfefe
covfefe
news cycle was fucking stupid. Oh, that was so dumb. One last piece of Elon Musk corner news, and that has to do with DOGE, who broke into the U.S. Institute of Peace, which is an independent nonprofit that is notably not part of the executive branch. This also came after the USIP board was fired by the Trump administration. Also unclear whether he had the authority to do that or unilaterally do that.
I do like the idea of them as rival gangs.
The U.S. Institute of Peace and the Trump administration?
Yeah,
I think.
DOGE.
And DOGE.
It's like West Side Story.
It's our Jets and the Sharks. Yeah, you called me a musical theater kid. You're coming out here with West Side Story.
That's a really well-known musical.
It is a really well-known musical.
Assassin's not a well-known musical.
That is fair. I did reference off mic Assassins to you yesterday. But it's a better musical in my opinion. That's not true. West Side Story is pretty great.
Yeah.
When you're a Doge all the way. Well, that's it for the Elon Musk corner.
The Trump administration plans a 25% staff cut at IRS Taxpayer Help Office. Just in time for tax season, more than 20% of employees staffing the Taxpayer Help branch of the IRS are set to be fired by the Trump administration. The Taxpayer Advocate Service, which is part of the IRS operating independently as a check on the agency, helps people with tax-related problems, including people with small businesses. It's basically customer support.
Yeah, can't wait to not get a tax return this year. Let's get out of the Trump administration and go over to Google. So Wiz, a cybersecurity startup firm, is being purchased by Google's parent company, Alphabet, for $32 billion. Google plans to integrate Wiz into its cloud computing sector, a fast-growing category as AI is placing more pressure on the need for data centers and computing power. Wiz itself originally was founded 5 years ago by 4 friends who met while serving in the Israeli army.
Bet they're friends with Gal Gadot.
I bet they are friends with Gal Gadot. Are you going to go see Snow White?
Hell no.
If approved by regulators, this will be Google's largest acquisition to date.
The prebiotic soda brand Poppi is being acquired by Pepsi for $1.65 billion. Pepsi made the move to add Poppi to its roster in an effort to court more health-conscious younger consumers, particularly those in Gen Z. Guess they don't like good-tasting beverages either. This is Pepsi's first foray into the prebiotic beverage space.
What is a prebiotic?
I don't know, but apparently you need to drink 73 Poppis to get any benefits.
Is prebiotic different than... I mean, I'm sure it's different than probiotic. And probiotics, what's in the Jamie Lee Curtis
That's in the Activia
stuff, right?
Yeah, I'm
I'm
so glad you asked me because I'm a doctor.
Listen, don't B2B sass me. And finally, Nvidia held its annual GTC conference this week. CEO Jensen Huang made a number of announcements about what's coming next for the company during his keynote. Some of the highlights include a partnership with General Motors to build out GM's self-driving vehicle fleet, something called Nvidia Dynamo, which is, I'm told, the operating system of an AI factory which will help companies streamline AI capabilities, and a new robotics platform called Newton in partnership with Disney Research. For the latter announcement, Huang was joined on stage by a robot that looks strangely familiar to WALL-E.
Wally.
We have WALL-E here now, everybody, guest on the podcast.
Beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop.
Despite all these announcements, Nvidia's stock slumped close to 4% earlier this week.
And that's the news you need to know today. So, Josh, what is the most innovative thing you have encountered in your daily life?
Myself and everyone I'm around is pretty uninnovative, but I think the thing that sticks out in my mind, this is so stupid. Do you like Chili's, the restaurant? Do you ever go to a Chili's?
No.
Okay, if you go to a Chili's, the pro tip is to order the chips and salsa and then also a side of ranch. And then dip your chips in the salsa and the ranch at the same time.
I'm not going to lie. That sounds disgusting.
It's so good. It's
I
so good.
respect it. I respect it.
It's the innovation we need today. What about you? What's the most innovative thing you've ever witnessed?
So there's 2 things. First of all, my friend Josh Zuboff published a novel this week.
Oh, cool.
Called Early 30s. It's really good. It's about 2 people in their early 30s in New York.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway, it's great. It's in bookstores now. It's gotten really good reviews across the board. So I did want to plug that. And then the other one is that my husband discovered a really innovative thing, which is if you're feeling sick, dipping jumbo-sized pretzels into chicken soup is so good.
So most of our innovations have to do with dipping one food into other goopier foods.
Do you see us on the most innovative companies list, Josh? No.
Like soft pretzels? Is that what you're talking about?
No, like hard pretzels.
Like hard pretzels
Yeah.
into soup
Mhm.
until they get soft, or just to kind of coat them on the outside?
We tried both ways, and then you got to get to a midpoint.
That's amazing.
So the reason we're talking about this is because it's mid-March again, which means Fast Company's annual Most Innovative Companies list is here. It's our namesake also. We talked to Fast Company's executive editor, Amy Farley, who oversees the MIC list, about how this year's list was put together, some of the companies who made it in the top 50, and what trends emerged. Amy, congratulations. Our most innovative companies issue is out.
We're probably not going to use that part for the social video.
Super weird.
For listeners at home, Yaz was holding up the magazine issue, which is on your newsstands right now, I believe. This is the 20th you'll be listening to this?
Should be on newsstands and hitting people's mailboxes.
Thrown lovingly at your door. No, it's not true. You can pick it up at your Barnes and Nobles, your Whole Foods. Publix?
Yeah.
Are we in Publix?
Yeah, we are in Publix.
Wow, Publix.
I was looking for an issue when I was visiting my grandma, and that was the only place.
Not Kroger, though, I bet. It doesn't feel like a Kroger.
Nope. So let's talk about the top 50. Are there any sort of overarching themes to this?
Okay, I want to preface this theme. I think it's very important to say this, that when we select the most innovative companies, it's a list of lists. We choose 50, which we feature on the print issue, and then we have 58 different lists for different industries, even geographical regions that we produce. The process for putting together, especially the top 50 list, begins back in September. It is months long. We've got a team of more than 4 editors and reporters, Yaz, you are heavily involved in this, you know this, who are involved in vetting these companies. We track their business success. We weigh them against their competitions. We also consider them against larger industry and societal trends. All that to say, this issue was in no way thrown together in response to the election or Elon Musk's role in the election. However, we found ourselves in the position of recognizing a collection of companies that all, in some way or another, are foils in competition with his businesses. So that is a theme. It is not one that we aimed to develop, but we discovered that we had arrived there at the end of this curation process.
So let's go through some of those businesses you're talking about, starting with Blue Sky. We had Rose Wang on the podcast. She's Blue Sky COO last year. Tell me about why it made the list.
Okay, so the social networking platform Blue Sky obviously saw a huge bump in users after the presidential election and in response to Elon Musk's use of X as a megaphone for MAGA. Blue Sky started 2024 with 3 million users, around 3 million. It's now at 33 million, so it had a huge bump, obviously, related to the election. And as your great interview with Rose Wang covered, it was very deliberate in imitating the X user experience so that it would be very easy for people to just migrate from X onto this platform.
And it was spun out of old X.
And it was, yes, exactly. And it was spun out of X. However, a lot of people initially were like, oh, it's just progressive Twitter, right? Or progressive X. It's really actually so much more than that. And I know you know this. It's pursuing a really radical vision for what social media can be. It's created a platform where users can customize their feeds, curate their experiences so that they can pursue any interest or political leaning. And then on top of that, it's letting developers build different apps on top of its AT protocol. And you can pull Blue Sky posts right into those products. So it's enabling would-be rivals to create their own experiences that compete with Blue Sky, and that is really profound. So I think the big takeaway for Blue Sky is that it's removing corporate, or in the case of Elon Musk, oligarchic control of the algorithms that control our social media experience, and it's handing that to users, and that's a really big deal. So that's why it's on the list, not because it is the un-X, it's because it is something so much more.
And it has a really interesting approach to moderation, right? That is so different from what X does.
It's truly in the user's hands. I mean, if you go into the settings portion of Blue Sky, there are literally dozens of different settings that you can tweak so that you can create exactly what you want. You can do the starter pack thing and follow groups of people. You can also follow other people's moderation settings if you'd like. So it's really in your hands. It's a little overwhelming.
Yeah, I find it really overwhelming.
Yeah.
And there are tens of thousands of different algorithms that you can choose to curate your feeds. Like I think, was it Rose Wang?
Yeah.
When you talked to her, she said she follows like the Moss.
The Moss feed.
The Moss account, which I now follow, and it's an excellent account.
Right. So yeah, it is super exciting to watch it grow and then to also watch the developers come in and start building on top of it.
I have to say, when you say watch it grow, my mind was still on Moss.
So let's talk about Waymo, which is our cover subject.
Yes.
I know they're competing with Tesla in some ways, piloting robo-taxis in Austin, but why is it on the cover? Why did you make that decision?
Yes. Okay. I'm going to start by saying it is very generous to Tesla to call it a competitor for Waymo. Because honestly, and this is why Waymo is on the cover, because right now in the U.S., there is no competitor out there in the robotaxi space. Not yet, at least. I mean, Elon would definitely like to be there, as would others. It has 700 plus cars on the road in San Francisco, Phoenix, and now Austin. It is completing 200,000 rides a week.
Wow.
That's double what it did even a few months ago, like in October. It's heading to Atlanta next, then Miami. It wants to roll out across the country. It has brought that sci-fi experience of, a driverless car into reality for so many people. I think what's really interesting here is that this is a really disruptive company. And disruption is a great buzzword from Silicon Valley. It's one of Alphabet's classic moonshots. But this is definitely not a move fast and break things kind of story. The progress that Waymo has made technologically has been slow and steady. It's been like decades long progress.
I remember when I was in college, people were saying in the next 5 years
it's just
we'll
around
all
the
be
corner.
in.
It's just around the corner. Yeah. So it's slow and steady, but also to get it into these cities, you have to do a lot of trust and safety work. You have to do a lot of convincing of regulators and of the public to feel comfortable with these things on the street, right?
It's a wild experience. I haven't been in one, but last time I was in San Francisco, I saw them for the first time driving around. It's a wild experience to just see someone in the back of a car.
Stories written by our global tech editor, Harry McCracken. Did he get in a car?
He did get in a car, and he had a funny moment where, like, the Waymo was a little bit tentative, sort of getting out into traffic at some point, and it was sort of like, no, but then, it was, out of abundance of caution. It was kind of like stalled until it was able to get going. But yeah, he went in it. He enjoys it. I keep telling everybody, when they're able to master the Jackie Robinson Parkway here in New York City, like, they can take over the world.
Yeah.
So, like, that's like a point to Waymo, get here, figure that one out, because that is a crazy roadway. So yeah, this is a slow but steady and also super fast company. It's fascinating to see that dynamic, and it's refreshing. We've covered Silicon Valley for a long time and seen the lack of transparency around a lot of companies and sort of, rush into things and then apologize obviously later. And Waymo is not that company. I think that's really interesting to recognize as well.
Couple of others we want to talk about that sort of contrast with some of Elon Musk's ventures. Rocket Lab, which is launching its own satellite constellation that could compete with Starlink. Tell me a little bit about that.
So Rocket Lab is a space launch company. It was originally founded in New Zealand, but now it's based here. And it had the second most launches in 2024 of any U.S. operator behind, obviously, SpaceX. This company is interesting. It does lighter payloads than SpaceX. So right now it's not in direct competition with SpaceX. It launches with remarkable speed and precision, which has made it a really important partner for a lot of different agencies and private companies. But it's also working on a heavier launch rocket that it hopes to get off the ground later this year, and that would put it in direct competition with SpaceX. And it's working on a satellite constellation that would put it into competition with Starlink. So I said we chose these companies not because they're Musk competitors. This one, I think, is a little bit more. It is interesting in and of itself. It's innovative in and of itself. But also, I think it is profoundly important, I think we can all agree on this, that we should not have one private company under the direction of an erratic and vindictive owner controlling our access into space. And Rocket Lab is really increasingly important as a company that presents another option for the government. If the government wishes to go that way, I don't know. But definitely for private companies that wanted to get into space.
We see
as well.
NASA sort of subcontract a lot of its work to SpaceX. Is Rocket Lab
Rocket Lab has contracts with NASA as well. They put up some, I believe it's satellites that helped track climate, like maybe polar ice caps. I might be speaking out of line here. But they definitely have government contracts as well. Again, they are not
for now.
Well, they're not a Musk competitor for now. It'll be interesting to see what happens later this year when they are in sort of the heavier payload space.
The last one I want to touch on is ICEYE.
Yeah.
Which I hope that's how you pronounce it.
That is how you pronounce it, yes.
Which has provided some imaging services to the Ukrainian government.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So that's a Finnish company that launches these satellites that are able to see through cloud cover and provide these remarkably clear images of the Earth. And they have a lot of different customers, but among them are some European defense contractors and nations, and Ukraine is one of them. I think it's really important. Again, SpaceX is heading into the space. They don't yet offer satellite images, right? They're in the satellite communications business right now, but they're working on it. They have this sort of cloaked in mystery division called Starshield, which would provide orbital images. And ISI will be a competitor. And I think especially for Europe, they need a different option, right? So ISI is seeing a lot of wind in its sails in recent months.
Starshield is such a grandiose name.
That's a great name. I
Now
love that.
to move on from sort of the incorrect to say Musk competitors, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah.
AI has its own category this year, but we've also seen it throughout the top 50 just as a technology that's used in a lot of companies and throughout the top 10 lists. I know mine have a bunch of AI features. Which AI companies did you decide to actually include in the top 50? How did you approach the list?
Yeah, it was actually a lot of work, and working closely with Mark Sullivan and Harry McCracken on our tech team who oversee a lot of this coverage. 2 years ago, we had OpenAI on the cover. This year, we decided not to have any of the big U.S. LLM companies. No OpenAI, no Anthropic, no Google DeepMind.
But you had one.
Yeah, right. Well, so then we sat with that and we said, this is right. All these companies, they're all kind of in this, like, they would argue with this characterization, but I'm going to call it a dead heat.
Yeah.
But one is doing this thing well, the other's doing this thing well, and one just came out and now it's ahead. And we said, we don't know which one is the winner here. So let's sit this out and see what happens. And so there was going to be no LLM company on the top 50. And then out of nowhere, this winter came DeepSeek. Not nowhere, it came out of China. And we decided that it definitely earned a place on the list. I mean,
knocked my entry right off the list.
now, Yaz.
Yaz has a LLM company that she submitted for MIC.
It's really good.
Nice. It creates the best AI-generated photos of shrimp Jesus I've ever seen.
It's so DeepSeek. It's just it achieved what other companies have been doing. And let me put this in. It's actually kind of a Musk competitor as well, right? Because it's competing with Grok and XAI. But it's achieved what other large language model makers have done, but much more efficiently and with, less powerful chips, demonstrating sort of a new way to get to sort of this really high-functioning, high-quality AI, but also it is open source. And so it has, published its papers and explained how it works to others so that they can follow its lead. There's a big question mark hanging over DeepSeek in the U.S. right now. I saw just this week, actually, we're recording.
Yeah.
Sorry.
2 weeks ago from when you listened to this.
Last week, right?
Last week?
Yeah.
But who knows what could have changed by the time this episode
early
comes
in
out.
March.
Let's just
early
say
in March.
OpenAI is petitioning for DeepSeek to be entirely banned in the
Classic.
U.S. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an argument there if we're considering for TikTok, but that said, even if it is banned here in the U.S., what it has done is profound, and it has shaken up the entire AI industry. So.
And when DeepSeek came up, it actually had a pretty profound negative impact on Nvidia's stock.
We talked about it on the show,
Yeah.
But Nvidia's on the list.
Nvidia's on the list. I mean, Nvidia makes the chips that DeepSeek was using. They're just older chips, right? And it's, coming up with new ones, and it has these entire platforms to help companies build their AI. So Nvidia is, it's no longer a $3 trillion market company. It's like a $2.85 trillion. It's still integral to AI. There was just some question about sort of how integral its newest chips would be, right?
Right.
I'd say there was a category of companies this year that were sort of like assistive AI companies, right? And I think that's where we've seen a lot of the energy. Whereas a few years ago, we were looking at the large language makers, now we're really seeing these super interesting applied AI companies. Glean is one of them. It's created this AI agent. Everybody at work is just awash in information, but we don't know where to find it, right? It's like control effing your life, or command effing your life. Glean, using natural language prompts, lets employees find that information, package that information, disseminate that information. It just makes employees' lives a lot easier. We also have AnySphere, which makes this AI coding agent called Cursor, which really helps people use natural language prompts to write code, but also it understands the context, the sort of broader project that the code is being written for, which makes it much more sophisticated than previous generations of coding assistants.
So You also rewarded companies who use technology like AI to actually create good human experiences. Duolingo is one of them. I've written about that owl before. Is it back from the dead yet?
It has been resurrected.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, zombie
Everybody
owl.
covered it when it died.
Yeah, well, isn't
And I was
that
like, this-
if it bleeds, it bleeds?
It was like, this stupid bird is not gone for good.
Yet another, let's say this, yet another Musk foil, because they said that the owl was killed in a hit and run accident by a Cybertruck.
That is so
I
funny.
forgot about that. That is really funny.
I
very
only saw
prescient.
like quickly the Duolingo owl died, and I was like, I don't need to know this story.
I saw it and I was like, we went through this with, remember Mr. Peanut died?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's right. This is more of a Jeff Beer territory.
Okay, I'm going to say, okay, let me get on my Duolingo high horse.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
high
yeah.
owl here. People dismiss this as you liked that joke.
That's good. Yeah, I don't know. It got me. It's the end of the day.
That was like mom humor. That was really bad. So people dismiss Duolingo as this goofy owl language learning app. But okay, they're killing it. Their revenue is up 40% year over year. It was up 44% the year before. They have 113 million users, 8.6 million paying subscribers. I think those numbers are up to date. They're a big public company.
Mm-hmm. And they have an emo girl that can deliver one.
And then we go,
Oh, no.
Okay, but I think a lot
hooked.
of people see the owl and dismiss it as this funny thing. So okay, so the Duolingo owl is this goofy green owl that lives on social media. It's become an internet main character. It's totally unhinged. It showed up at the Charlie XCX concerts over the summer because it's Brad Green.
And the Barbie red carpet.
Barbie red carpet. Okay. They did a partnership with Squid Games with Netflix over the Squid Games new season. And they literally created a K-pop song and a music video, and it's a bop.
That's so good.
That's
so
incredible.
good.
Okay, and the owl, gets killed last month, and everybody loses their minds, and then he's resurrected, and everybody's happy again. All of that seems really playful and weird and attention-grabbing, but around the owl, they have created this kind of universe of characters.
Yep.
So there's the owl, who's known as Duo. Actually, he has gender. He's known as Duo. And they also have this emo girl named Lily, who's got purple hair, covers her eyes. She's always rolling her eyes, or her eye. And they've created this thing, and it seems like it's just kind of a branding exercise for them. But actually what they have been building towards is this new video chat product that they launched last year. Because the last hurdle for language learning is really conversation. And that's been a critique of Duolingo along the way, is it's flashcards and a lot of repetitive and rote exercises, but being able to converse will get you over that final hurdle, right? And so for their power users, a lot of whom are not Americans. Americans are generally just doing basic Spanish or French. But, if you live elsewhere, you want to learn English because this is a professional necessity. They want to have that conversational thing. But Duolingo had noticed A, it's too expensive and it's not scalable to have one-on-one conversations with human tutors, right? Or they also noticed that a lot of people get super intimidated when you see a human on the other side of the call and you just want to hang up. So we're why don't we put our emo girl Lily on the call, and she will lead you in a conversation, and it works.
They're targeting millennials so hard with
Josh
that.
is joining now. This is gonna be this is gonna be your her moment. Hola, Lily, vamos a la playa. King Lily to the beach.
Lily doesn't go to the beach. I don't think emo girls go to the beach. But
It's almost a DJ dashboard confessional.
I just think it's this brilliant melding of AI, of product, which Duolingo nails. They nail product. They know how to do that. And this branding thing. And they've seen these disparate things, but actually Duolingo has been knitting them together month after month to this sort of really, I think, killer new product. And I just think more companies should be following the Duolingo playbook because it's really smart.
There's always a few wild cards on the list. We're going to talk about a few. The first being probably my favorite entry on the top 50.
Mine too.
Entangled Publishing. We've seen romantasy as a category take off over the past few years. What does this company have to do with it?
So this company is an indie book publisher. They're known for publishing Rebecca Yarros. And if you know, you know.
Well, it's not even if you know, you know. It's like you go to any bookstore.
Rebecca Yarros is
and
a
it's-
crossover hit now.
And like we've been traveling for South by Southwest, and every airport bookstore has Onyx Storm and the new Malcolm Gladwell book about talking to people you don't know, and that's it. There's nothing else.
Has Malcolm Gladwell read the new Onyx Storm is really the
He
question.
would draw some terrible conclusions.
yeah, I don't want his
I'm
revisionist
so ready
history
for one of the
episode
worst,
about it.
worst pieces of analysis I've ever read in my life.
So our editor, Brendan, was on a train the other day and saw like a man reading Onyx Storm. I was on the plane the other day. The man next to me was reading Onyx Storm. I just want to say romantasy is for everybody. But so Rebecca Yarros, the author of this romantasy series called Imperium, has now 3 books out. The third one, Onyx Storm, was published in January. And immediately after it published, she pulled off this remarkable feat where she had places 1, 2, and 3 on the New York Times fiction bestseller list. Like, that is amazing.
And she's a book talker, too. She's very active on TikTok.
She's active on, I think it might be Instagram more than...
It's more on Instagram?
But romantasy is a big book
big
talk
TikTok,
thing. What makes Entangled interesting is that it's an indie publisher. It also really workshops books. It sends, as it gets a new manuscript in, and its editors are like, oh, this is a good book, they send it out to a group of test readers, and they actually like keep checking in with the readers to see when they start sort of flagging with the book, you know, like, and if they see like on chapter 4 their interest is waning, then like Entangle said, like, you know, pick up the pace in chapter 4. So they are really good at just like figuring out what readers want. What's also interesting is that they're taking this romantasy IP and they're channeling it into film and television. So already Michael B. Jordan's production company, Outlier Society, has optioned Rebecca Yarros' books. So that should be interesting. I just feel like also with more capability to create more affordably things like dragons for the stream. Like romantasy is like destined to have its moment right now. Like, so watch that space.
Entangled is also considering making books into video games, though, and graphic novels.
Yeah, I mean,
That is
when
a
you
great
have
idea.
when you have this crazy IP, like why not?
Yeah. So another one we should talk about is Shark Ninja.
Yeah.
Which, I'll be honest, I own a Dyson Airwrap from reviewing it for the magazine one time, and I don't understand how to use it. It's been years. It's impossible. But Shark Ninja makes a dupe of it that people love.
I think Shark Ninja wouldn't say that they're in the dupes business
necessarily. But I would. Yeah.
They definitely make a lot of products that are, you know, close to
rather similar to Dyson.
To the Dyson.
Don't hate the player, hate the game.
But they also have some very cool sort of, you know, designs and a cool design process. They created a cooler this year that you could say like goes head to head with Yeti, but it's like a cooler that has like a special drawer in it so that if you need to keep anything dry away from sort of the wet in your cooler, like you can pop it in that drawer. They have a home slushy maker, a frozen drinks machine.
Oh, I've seen
called
this.
the Slushy. It
I
went
really
viral.
want this.
Yeah.
Is it humongous?
It's pretty big.
I think we need to get it for
The Office?
Office? Oh
Yes.
my God, yes.
They're a really interesting company. They were sort of like, but they felt like a late night infomercial kind of company.
To me, they feel like a Simple Human. You know?
Oh, that's, I think, yeah.
Even though Simple Human went bankrupt, so we...
Maybe not the comparison they want.
Yeah, let's hope this has a different model.
I just think they're seen by some as a dupe of Dyson.
Yeah.
But they're also coming up with some really interesting products. And they are listening to users and testing them in interesting ways and coming up with some crazy things like the slushy machine, which is cool.
The slushy machine's like fairly affordable too.
I've
done research.
You were really pricing this out.
Listen, I saw that slushy. I love a slushy. Listen.
With Klarna, it'll be very affordable.
A company not on this list. Now, the last one I want to talk about is Zinc. They make the
I love this so
they make
much.
the popcorn containers that people joke you could jerk off inside. They made the Dune 2 viral popcorn
excuse me,
bucket.
joke.
Not a line that appeared in print.
I mean, those Dune buckets went so viral.
I'm sorry, like didn't they knew what they were doing.
Yes, of course they did.
So, okay, I as your sober-minded print editor. They are the Australian company that makes movie collectible items, commemorative things that movie theaters can sell, like a Wicked drink cup.
Yeah.
And yes, the Dune popcorn bucket. What's exciting about it, or what's interesting about it, is that it's brought a lot. I mean, these things resell on eBay, right? Like they've become viral hits. There are reasons why that Dune popcorn bucket took off, and you can call Yaz and she will explain it to you if you'd like to know. But it's no surprise to anybody that movie theaters are struggling, and having this extra revenue stream is meaningful to them. So not only is it kind of creating fun and a lot of buzz around these movies and, great for marketing, but also it's good for the movie theater. So win-win.
We'll be back with Amy for keeping tabs, but first a quick break followed by our conversation with senior writer Ainsley Harris on Robinhood.
Loom helps your team have fewer, better meetings. Use video messages to share quick context or feedback between meetings. And add Loom AI to your calendar for instant meeting notes and recordings. Try Loom today at loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
If you are a regular listener of this podcast, you'll remember that I talked to Robinhood's co-founder and CEO Vlad Tenev last summer. Since that conversation, Robinhood has made huge bets on crypto and prediction markets, and those bets have paid off handsomely and landed the company as number 16 on this year's MIC list. We talked to senior writer Ainsley Harris, who wrote the story for the latest issue of the magazine. So Ainsley, I want to start by talking about prediction markets, because that is how you begin your piece. How and when did these grow in popularity, and how is Robinhood capitalizing on all of this?
Prediction markets really had their breakthrough moment, I would say, with the election in November. That was when probably they attracted the most new users. There are a few platforms where people have been able to essentially make bets on the outcome of particular events for a while now. You may have heard of Polymarket, for example, or Kalshi. I hope I'm saying that right. And Robinhood decided to get in the game for itself. Yep. And their big entry point was the presidential election. And at the time, there had been some clarification from the courts around what kind of prediction markets were legal. And you could kind of structure a prediction market essentially as an event contract, which is sort of like a form of futures trading. And so that sort of gave them their green light that they needed to kind of make a move and test the waters. And it was an incredibly successful test for them. They saw an enormous number of these sort of event contracts traded. And not only that, so they made a big of money from it, but it also sort of proved the case that prediction markets can be valuable in that their market predicted Trump's victory. So, not only did they make money, but I think people sort of walked away with this impression that, hey, these things are valuable sources of information, and perhaps we want to do this again.
Throughout your piece, you talk about how Robinhood has matured and maybe how it's trying to appeal to the great wealth transfer that will happen among boomers to millennials. Tell me a little bit about how it's grown up and how it's kind of setting itself up for that event.
Yeah, Robinhood, I mean, they've been around for a while now, and I feel like, their early customers were those young people with their first job looking to buy a share of a company that they admired. Maybe you want to own some fractional shares of Apple or Tesla or something like that. And the platform has really matured since then. And it's part of the reason, we felt like they deserved a spot on this year's list was that they've done that maturing in a really smart way. They have really built out all these different pieces of the ecosystem so that they are offering, retirement accounts, for example, and things that, are sort of very traditional, but they are at the same time moving very aggressively into the categories that generate the most trading volume. So that would be crypto, options trading. Those pieces of the puzzle are really driving an enormous amount of their revenue growth. But at the same time, they are, setting themselves up to capture these sort of more like passive sources of wealth that, as people move more money onto the platform, that's good for them. The more assets under management you have, the better. But the active trading is also a really important piece, of course, and is really the primary piece of their business at the moment. So I think they've done a really good job of both appealing to people who are incredibly active traders and who want the sort of best in class and cheapest tools to do that. But at the same time, sort of building out these responsible and also very sticky things. They have a new credit card. They have these subscription products. Ways to keep people there for the long haul is clearly sort of another piece that they're laying the foundation for.
That makes a lot of sense. Vlad Tenev was a guest on our podcast last year, and we talked a little bit about SEC regulation in crypto. It's obviously way less of a thing. I think when new rules were announced, he called it
RIP regulation.
Yeah. I think he called it like
you mean
a
Brendan
great...
Carr's not doing a good job?
I think he had some quote like, this is a great, move towards the future. Can you just give us an update on where things stand?
Yeah, I mean, Robinhood is this very interesting example of how things have changed. They were quite conservative, relatively speaking, in which tokens they had listed for quite some time. So, you can trade lots of stuff on Coinbase. Robinhood, it was a much more selective set of options. And yet, they were still doing an enormous amount of crypto volume. So they were attracting people to the platform with those tokens, but still being relatively conservative and I think very aware of the fact that the regulations have been ambiguous. And then you have Trump elected. They become a co-sponsor of this crypto inaugural ball. And around that same time as that ball, right before Inauguration Day, Trump, of course, announced his Trump meme coin. And Robinhood, within essentially like 24 hours, had that coin available to trade, which for them was a real break with the precedent that they had set in terms of sort of their own listings. And I think really is sort of marks a turning point potentially in how they're thinking about their offerings there. They moved a lot faster than normal. And also they've listed a coin that, is, I don't know exactly how you would describe it, but it's certainly not an established coin with a lot of trading history and strong foundation behind it. So this is like a pure meme coin, and that is now something that people can go to Robinhood and find. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what they do going forward in crypto.
Yeah, I remember when we had Vlad Tenev on the podcast, he was arguing that crypto is a utility like water.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, I really regret not saying to him, well, then why are you charging for, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And isn't there like a difference between like, we talk about meme coins that aren't like backed up by things. There is some like backing to Bitcoin, for example. And those kind of occupy two different tracks. Am I right there? And
kind of. I mean, you can certainly, all of it is in some extent based on people's expectations. I mean, to some extent, any currency is. But I think, yes, there has been a distinction between the sort of more established coins who have really worked to build up their credibility and then the ones that are the rug pull, pump and dump kind of variety. And I think, Robinhood was clearly making a distinction initially in terms of its own choices on that front. And interestingly, I do not believe they listed the Melania coin. So maybe they are continuing to draw a line there. But yes, Trump was available to trade. And a lot of people, and this is the risk for them, it can obviously leave a really bad flavor in people's mouths when then they lose a lot of money on these meme coins, right? And so that happened in many cases. And I think for a lot of people, it was their first experience with crypto. We saw a really interestingly large number of people setting up these wallets for the first time in order to trade the Trump coin. And so those folks got burned in many cases. And then, I don't know how loyal of a Robinhood customer you're going to be if that was your first experience.
I will say to that point, though, I mean, we saw the meme stock craze affect Robinhood, and they've still managed to kind of recover from that reputational hit, right?
Well, you talked to them right after the Roaring Kitty returned.
No, they have. And I think that they've been able to demonstrate their real value of what they offer. So, they've been really focused on what they talk about as active traders and building desktop trading for them and launching all these new things. And for a trader like that, that's someone who's making very rational decisions based on the cost of the different products they want to use. And I think they understand that they need to have this core user base that is going to keep coming back and that's making rational decisions and that they can build products for. And they've kept those people loyal and also given them reasons to keep moving more money to Robinhood. So, I think they're winning that game really effectively. But at the same time, they want to attract new traders. Yeah. So I think it's going to be and a lot of times what people are trading for the first time these days is not what a different generation was trading for the first time. So, striking that balance, I think, is going to be that's what's so interesting about them right now is how do they strike this balance? The way that people want to engage with investing in money right now is sort of at odds with the way that we've traditionally thought about money and investing. People want to have this experience with it that is much more exciting. And as we talked about in the piece, like maybe a little bit nihilistic too. It's like nothing matters. So I'm going to try to make an extra buck and maybe I'll get lucky. And I think, how do you sort of cater to that culture and respond to it while at the same time building this sustainable business is a real challenge.
Now that we've talked about futures, now that we've talked about crypto, now that we've talked about prediction markets, a lot of people are saying that's irresponsible investing. I mean, it's a similar argument to sports betting to some extent. How does Vlad respond to this?
His take is that, well, one, they weren't doing anything in sports at the time that we originally talked with him for our story. I think they are now with all this prediction market stuff going to be getting into that.
Absolutely.
So all these sort of barriers that used to exist between these different forms of betting, investing, gambling are kind of breaking apart. And that is really a result of the fact that people are looking to these tools in different ways. And you have this whole generation that has sort of given up on the idea of the American dream being this sort of like incremental advancement. And by the time you retire, this like pot of gold waiting for you, people realize that has all fallen apart. And so you see all these different ways that people are responding to that. You have, for example, the like quiet quitting movement or the anti-work movement or the FIRE movement where people are trying to retire early. And degen trading or sort of this kind of like gambling type behavior we're seeing related to investing is like a huge piece of that, where I think people are realizing, like, I'm not going to be able to put enough money away just based on this sort of steady incremental model of what building wealth used to look like. I only will have enough if I get lucky. And that mindset leads you to this willingness to gamble, essentially. And whether or not we like want to call investing in stocks gambling, I think there is the same desire at the root of a lot of these behaviors where people realize if they want to get ahead, getting ahead sort of means getting lucky, and that there's a real sort of like nihilism then attached to that. And that's also why we see a lot of the sort of like online culture and humor and conversation and memes around this stuff is because it's both like very serious because it's very sad that people feel this way, but it's also part of this internet culture where like nothing matters.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. The argument that Tenev had when we had him on the podcast, and I think it's one that he's repeated countless times, is that, it's the sort of guns don't kill people, people kill people one, where it's very like, we're a platform.
Having your retirement account right next to betting on the Boston Celtics it doesn't kill people.
Yes. No, they want to keep people in Robinhood, right? Yeah. They want you to maybe you come and you notice the prediction market and you weren't initially planning to make a bet and you decide that you will because you actually have a strong view on the outcome of March Madness or what have you. So it is a way for them to keep people engaged and coming back. And that is obviously just like really at odds with this old idea of money where you set it and forget it. Those are just, fundamentally sort of opposed. I think, Vlad certainly will tell you that for as much as people on the platform are engaging with options trading and prediction markets, they are maybe doing that with like a little bit of fun money. And then the core of their wealth is in, very basic index funds or that sort of thing. Or at least that's the model that I think he believes in or would like to believe in. But certainly the Wall Street Journal, I think, has done some great reporting where they have talked to folks who are ending up in Gamblers Anonymous groups who have gotten sucked into these products. So his point is certainly true that, like, yes, guns don't kill people, I guess. But, like, yeah, the products certainly have a darker side. And, it's a little unclear, like, as this market matures and as they grow, like, what that will look like.
I've thought about this a lot because in the UK, betting's been a thing for a long time. And I've been trying to think, we have this panic around gambling and prediction markets in the US that is not new in other countries. But I think the frictionless nature of it is. Do you see what I mean?
Totally. And I think it's sort of it doesn't always feel like real money.
Yeah.
And then when it's crypto, it's not really real money. And yeah, no, all these sort of time and time again, if you look at online forums, there are people who are getting burned. And I think oftentimes they don't understand the math of these products, like what, it actually means to do options trading. Like those are complex products, and there's a reason that a lot of professionals use them, right? So, there's that piece of this, but there's also just I think the lack of oversight has created this world in which people can make these bets and not really face consequences. So, or lose a lot of money, but there's not consequences for the platforms.
Last question for you. What do you think is coming next for the company? Sports betting?
Yeah. I mean, I think their interest in prediction markets is clearly a priority for them. And it's going to be really interesting to see sort of how far they go with that. There are obviously a million different things you can think of listing. So the way, some of these platforms like Polymarket, the different things that you can bet on are determined by Polymarket's staff. So they're choosing those things and listing them. And I guess you could call it an editorially driven approach. So I'm guessing that Robinhood is obviously going to be making its own sort of editorial choices about what's available to trade there. And it will be really interesting to see what they highlight and whether it is more sports, more politics, or something else entirely.
I want to be able to bet on local school board elections. Just real go degenerate gambler on this.
You found an edge. Yeah.
Well, this was great, Ainsley. Thank you so much for coming on. Okay, we are back with Amy, and it's time to wrap up the show with Keeping Tabs. This is where each one of us shares a story, a trend, or a piece of pop culture we're following right now. And Amy, since you're our guest, what are you keeping tabs on?
Okay, what I'm keeping tabs on, I'm married to a Canadian. I have 2 hockey-playing children. I am keeping tabs. I know this is the least important part of the 51st state, 11th province discussion happening right now. But hockey terminology entering the mainstream.
Yeah, Mark Carney.
Mark Carney with dropping the gloves. Everybody knows who Connor McDavid is, right?
Not me.
Okay, Connor McDavid.
How do you... Oh, well, I guess NHL is a little niche for a non-sports fan at all.
Couple of months ago. Sorry,
is he hot?
Rather.
Connor McDavid.
I don't think that's the first term that usually
Not
is
the
associated
first,
with
right.
him.
Most hockey players, they're a little
Busted.
busted
They're a little
in the
busted.
mouth after sometimes.
There was a Four Nations tournament last month. Canada beat the U.S. Trump was, with his 51st state rhetoric, was all inserted in this. Canada beat the U.S. in the finals, in the overtime, with a goal from Connor McDavid, who is arguably the best player in the world right now. And now McDonald's in Canada are sporting McDavid signs outside.
That's cool. I like that. I like that.
There was this photographer, this Canadian photographer, who photographed a Canadian goose fighting off the attack by a bald eagle last week, and that sort of went viral.
Oh my
so
God,
there's
that's so...
There are these sort of
I remember
moments
that
have just jumped into the mainstream, and there's not a lot around this discussion that gives me joy, but this does. So
yeah, I like that. Somebody told me recently, somebody who went to McGill was the lamest thing that they do at McGill is they call it, some people call it the Harvard of the North.
They do. I have heard that before.
Which
mostly
is Harvard's already north.
Only
only
from people who went to McGill. So you hear that.
Wait, no.
I went to grad school. Someone who went to McGill.
Is your friend Canadian?
Yes.
Okay. Because literally not a single Canadian I know, and I know a lot of them who've gone to McGill, have ever said that.
in your presence. Your presence.
No.
Anyway,
No.
I think that's hilarious. If it becomes our 51st state, we'll be even funnier.
We are the 11th province.
Is it more of an Ivy League school than Cornell?
Yep. Josh, what are you keeping tabs on?
I'll stick with the sports theme for now. I'm keeping tabs on NFL free agency, which opened up this week, and I'm endlessly.
It's how Braxton Berrios is a Texan now.
Yeah, there you go. I'm sure your
That's
husband.
my one thing I know.
Is
language? I have no idea what's being said.
No, I mean, separate and apart from I'm a Chargers fan, they haven't done a ton in free agency. That's neither here nor there. But I'm just constantly surprised by how sports leagues have managed to create big press moments when games aren't happening, that like every sport is a year-round sport at this point. Like the media coverage around NFL free agency, and then they're going to have the draft coming up, and the NBA does the same thing, is really incredible. I mean, it just keeps it going. It's incredible how many eyeballs this gets when it's really just like term sheets and announcements of like guaranteed money and funny money and how many years on a contract.
Do you think the MLB deliberately engineered the see-through uniforms last spring training just for... There's a conspiracy theory.
People can bet on something.
Oh, yeah. I pretty much assume every single thing around sports comes back to like FanDuel or Caesars Sportsbook.
That's fair. That's fair.
That Chumba.
Chumba. I can't. Every time I think of Chumba Casino, I just think of Chumbawamba. Every single time.
Of course.
Which, if the guys from Chumbawamba created
that'd be
a
bleak.
casino,
That'd be bleak.
I feel like the
they
guys
came back for the ad campaign. Ooh.
I'd put them at number 50 on MIC.
Yeah.
No, they're more of a Web3 company now. They make NFTs. That's Chumbawamba's doing now. Yaz, what are you keeping tabs on?
So we talked about Love is Blind with Pavithra, but I was really struck by the reunion over the weekend. And I bring this up because we have Minnesotan here. This season took place in Minnesota and was incredibly boring.
Yeah.
I gotta say. Just
Shocking.
like, Jesus. And the Wall Street Journal had an article that was funny where they were like, Minnesota is too small for Love is Blind to take place in because they keep running into each other at the bar postseason because there's like 2 bars everyone goes to. But the really interesting thing is the season was really boring. The reunion, super interesting. Because what ended up happening, the women were so much more progressive than the men.
Oh, boy.
Uh-huh.
You know, we rarely
There was one
see...
particular clip that was going viral and had all of the usual suspects.
Oh, is this
from
where the woman
manosphere.
ditched the guy at the altar?
Yeah.
That even
Yeah, it
reached
happened
me.
with 2 of the weddings where the men were way more conservative, didn't believe in LGBTQ values, and it's a city that saw, George Floyd was murdered there. Like,
Yeah.
it saw widespread protests. And to see the sort of politics fall so much along gender lines
Yeah.
was really interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess in my head, I thought Minneapolis was pretty liberal. Usually vote blue, I think.
Yeah, but I mean,
But I didn't realize
anywhere
how...
you go, though, it's still like, even in the most red states or the most blue states, there's still a lot of people who are of the non-majority party in those states. You know what I mean?
No, I totally know that. I guess I was surprised that it was so starkly among gender lines, if that makes sense.
Well,
and all the men were very like, well, it's because I'm Christian, and the women were very much like, yeah, I am too, but this doesn't track.
Yeah.
But I'd like birth control.
Yeah, exactly. But
well, this was like
much.
a huge talking point before the election about like, and I'm pretty sure it panned out, at least according to like exit poll data, that it was the largest gender split in any election. I would have to look that up. But I
Now
think
I want to like go parse the data
true.
about Minnesota. I mean, I definitely saw
Yeah.
like the area where I grew up, which was solidly blue, like it's turning sort of red, and that's suburbs of Minneapolis. So it's
it's just rare to see that kind of discussion happen on reality TV in a way that's not completely stupid either.
And
so
to go
anyways,
deep into this, Steve Kornacki on the map.
I'm also picturing that scene in Fargo with the 2 girls at the bar. Was that like the entire Love is Blind? It was like...
The accents are crazy.
Also not nearly as pertinent, but do all men look the same?
Yeah, they all look the same on
in
this
Minneapolis.
show.
Every
They all
single
look like
white
Jamal.
guy looked exactly the same.
Yeah, it was like a real talking point that like it was just white people getting together and all the men looked exactly the same.
Out of my high school.
And that's it for Most Innovative Companies. Amy, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Our show is produced by Avery Miles and Blake Odom, with help from Sam Gebauer and Hawa Atori. Editing by Matt Toder, mix and sound design by Nicholas Torres, and our executive producer is Josh Christensen. Remember again to subscribe, rate, and review, and we will see you next week.
Save time, communicate better with your team, and get more done with Loom.